Hi, I'm Stephen Orr, and today we're talking about decorating with houseplants. And I grew up in a house that was filled with houseplants. My mom loved them. She had them in the front window, the back window, the sunroom. So it's great to just be able to be surrounded by plants. I think it's more popular than ever. The past couple of years, people have really taken to houseplants again. It's having a big renaissance. And what we're going to talk about today is how you can decorate with these beautiful plants, how you can arrange them and layer them in your home, and also the best way to care for them so that they look their best. One of the best ways to decorate with these houseplants is to arrange them in groups. I like to use odd numbers. That's kind of a classic design technique where you're using either 3, 5, or 7. It just makes it less symmetrical. You want it to have kind of a casual feel. You don't want it to feel like if there's 4 items with 2 smalls and 2 bigs, it feels a little formal. Pick 3 different sizes. You could do small, medium, big. You could do something that's quite large, something that's quite small, all in a little group. So in this case, what's nice is also picking plants that have a nice contrast among themselves. So this ivy, which has a trailing effect, and then this kind of spiky corn plant, and then a cycad relative that has these big, beautiful sculptural graphic leaves, but has more of an upright growth is really great. Paying attention to kind of grouping colors together, like this silvery Chinese evergreen and kind of a philodendron with a silvery cast to it, and then a little fern, all kind of works together. And you can think how your pots relate as well, so that you have different glazes, but they kind of mimic a similar look, and then you kind of throw something off with a natural rattan. Or you can pick just one big plant. People love indoor trees, or one large plant. Sometimes you have a houseplant that actually gets large on its own, like a Norfolk Island pine will get really tall over time, or a fiddle leaf fig will get really large. So one statement plant is also really great in a corner of a room. And even once you're in your own home, you want to group the plants that like to be together and like similar conditions. And I found that even when you group the plants together, they help each other. There's a little more humidity created, how the moisture is evaporating during the day and the night. And also you can put the plants that have similar light conditions and air temperature conditions in the same group. One other fun place to put plants is in the bathroom. If you have a shower window, you can put a fern in that window and basically almost never water it because it's getting splashed, and also the air moisture from the shower. And one thing to think about, is your furniture. You don't want to harm your furniture with rings or with condensation circles. That's all a problem you can have, especially when you're using unglazed terracotta. That can really sweat on wood. You wouldn't want to put that right on wood. If you want to be super safe, you can use one of these houseplant saucers. They're not very attractive, but if you're in the right spot, they kind of disappear. Often I'll just use an old dish. That's the sort of thing that you just want to make sure you have the right plant in the right spot and you're not harming your furniture. And then if you want something else that's more decorative, you can use, there's a fancy French phrase for it, cache-pot, which actually means hidden pot in French. And cache-pots are something that's sold that is a pot that you put another pot in, and the main pot has no hole in the bottom. So for instance, this one, which is rattan that's been painted partly, has the nursery pot, which is basically it's going to be living in this. This is what you're going to take out and water. You can water that in the kitchen sink. You can put it in the shower. The other one, it has a liner inside that also helps. So this also protects the rattan. When you see a pot that's like this, you know that it shouldn't have contact with moisture and soil. So that's a great way to do it. And then another way to do it is to use a large decorative pot like this one, which is quite heavy, and you don't want to tote this back and forth to water it. You also don't want to water it in place, perhaps, because maybe it's on a wood floor. You want to make sure there's no condensation. You can take out this center part and just take that. What I normally do is I water it in the sink, and maybe before work or at night, I put it in the sink, I water it really well, I leave it in the sink overnight, and then I put it back the next morning. Another thing I do with my plants is I give them kind of a spa day in the shower, and I'll take all the plants like from one area and just put them all in the bathtub and run the shower over them for a few minutes. It gets the dust off them, and also then I just shut the shower curtain or shower doors and I let them stay in there all day. I just think of it like a spa day for those houseplants. One other touch that you can do is, let's say that you do have the edge of the pot showing, or you want to make sure that the inside pot isn't showing. You could make sure the level of it's a bit lower, and then you could add moss or this decorative kind of tree moss that's dried on top, and that will just make the top of it look a lot nicer. For watering in general, it's pretty simple. I tend to water my houseplants about once a week. That's my general rule of thumb. Sometimes it's every week and a half. Sometimes if I'm on vacation and I just want to see who survives, I go 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. That's a long time. I'm pretty much tough love on my plants. As we all heard, you can love your plants too much, and that generally involves overwatering. You want to water them really well, maybe about once a week, and that's about it, maybe a week and a half. So when you do that, that's why I like to remove them from whatever pot there is, so I don't have to underwater. I can just really thoroughly give them a good drink and let it drain and then put it back. Also for drainage, what you can do is, take a pebble from outside or a small rock, or I often keep, if a terracotta pot breaks, I usually keep the shards. That's good to put in the bottom of the pot just to kind of keep all the soil from leaching out of the bottom of the pot that has a hole. Air humidity, that's one of the big problems with houseplants, is our interior of our home is so dry in the winter with either a radiator or forced air heater. So, regular misting is something you can do while you call your mom or your grandparents, and just be misting while you're on the phone is something you can do just to make those plants happy. Also, another tip is to take a saucer like this plastic one, or you could use a ceramic dish, and you just add a layer of pebbles here and fill that with just like 1/2 inch of water or 1/4 inch of water, and then you can place your plant on top, and that does help create kind of a humid atmosphere that most houseplants like. You don't need to do that with cactus or succulents, of course. So some of the problems you can telltale signs on your houseplants if you're having trouble is, when you start to see dried leaves, this ivy, most of the leaves are really healthy, but right over here you start to see some dried leaves. You might want to turn it over and look at it really carefully. Make sure there's no pests like spider mites or whitefly. Spider mites, you can tell, you'll see most houseplants, if you start to see anything sticky, like a sticky sap on there, if there's any stickiness to the touch, that means they do have some of these pests. So you'd have to figure out how you're going to handle that. It can be very challenging in an indoor environment, whether you're going to just try to brush them off with a strong jet of water, or whether you're going to use an insecticide, or whether you're going to use soap and water. There's a lot of different techniques. I tend to strategically try to do the least chemical one first and see where I get, and then if it requires something more, I might either use that chemical, or I might just try to get rid of the plant if it seems like it's too late to save and it's going to infect other plants. So just make your choices, but first thing, make sure there's no pest. The other thing would be to make sure that you're watering well. This sign to me is that these plants have probably been a little bit dry from either air moisture or underwatered slightly. So you might want to mist them a little more or move them away from a heater. Same with this fern. It's showing signs here on this leaf that maybe it's just been a little underwatered, or perhaps it's not getting enough air moisture. So you might just want to alter where it is in the house. I tend to move my plants a lot and try different spots for them. You don't have to treat your plants like furniture in the fact that they arrive in your home and then they stay that way for the next 20 years. You can actually move them around so you don't get bored with the way they look. One of the other things that's good to consider is if you need to repot. Most houseplants will go years in their pot, so you don't really have to worry about it. If you start to see signs of decline, then you do want to make sure that that plant has enough room. Sometimes you also see just a plant that's in a bad pot. So in this case, we went on a journey around the office, and we found this sad character. He's an aloe, and he's a little droopy, and we think he can be rescued. So we're today going to try to rescue this aloe, and aloes can get very large. This one may have been in this pot for a long time and just not grown very much because he didn't have much root room. So what we found was that this pot is inside a nursery pot that has almost no soil left, and then it's inside a little plastic pot. So what we would do is try to put it in a nice new pot, which is a little more appropriately scaled for the size of the aloe. So the first thing we'll do is look at the pot and make sure, especially for a succulent, it has good drainage. This one is a kind of pot you'll find in a lot of home centers where it has a drainage hole and then an attached tray. What I tend to do when I water with these is water, let it sit for a minute, and then make sure I dump all the water out of the tray. First of all, you don't want the tray sloshing everywhere. I usually do this in the kitchen sink, and then also it just helps, these sort of plants especially don't want to sit in standing water. So what I would do is add a rock over the hole, and then I would put in enough soil to get the plant to the right height. So to do that, I might try a couple of times by taking it out of its, so you can see there's hardly any soil left. This is almost all roots. And I want to make sure I pot this at the right level. So I'm going to put a little more soil in. And I'm using a well-draining potting soil. You can use one that's for succulents, and that'll be really good drainage. So that's about the right height. So I'm going to hold it there in the middle, and then I'm going to just add soil all around. And on rotating it so that the plant stays upright and doesn't flop over on one side. So in this one, I will tamp down the soil, and also will water it in to make sure the soil is all firm around the plant and that the plant has enough spots to grow in. So once we have it planted, you can see it still looks a little sad. One of the things I think we should do first is cut off some of the leaves. So with some scissors, I'm just going to trim off all the leaves that look really kind of deflated. Succulents are really tough plants, but you can see that this guy is kind of at the end of he's tired of trying. So we're going to help him out. We're going to get rid of all these wilted, shriveled leaves on the bottom and give him a good dose of water. And I don't think he probably needs fertilizer. I just think he needs soil. And he looks a little funny now, but you know, in a few months actually, he'll really start to fill out, and if you put him in a bright spot, he'll be a beautiful plant. One other thing, if this is too much stem for you, you can let him kind of recover, and then you can start to bury him a little bit here or here so that he has more soil around, so there's not as much stem if that's not a look you like. So now that we have this guy back on the road to recovery, I just want to encourage everybody to give houseplants a try. They're actually so wonderful to work with. They're alive, they bring a sense of life to your home, and what a better way to decorate than with living things.